Bit of a bland performance, but 3 points is 3 points. You know what, Joe? We're not going to give a bland performance. It's the happy hour.
Yeah, hello and welcome back to the United Happy Hour where, like you say, Pauly, United may be putting up some lackluster performances recently, but we certainly won't be. Having said that, I've just realised just before we went live there, I've accidentally called my granddad, so that's probably not a good start to what is meant to be not a lackluster performance. So
put him on the show. What does he feel about West Ham?
He didn't want to talk there. He didn't want to talk. I obviously pressed it again really quickly, but they tried bringing me back just before we were about to go live, so I've just had to get someone else take the call for me. But everything's all good. I hadn't realised I pressed it. It's just one of those calls. But you know how it is. We do it in the group chat all the time, to be fair, don't we?
All the time. How many times do we get like FaceTime and video calls, and I'm like, I'm not answering this. I know nobody wants to talk to me.
No, exactly, mate. No. Anyway, nobody wants to know about who we're calling and how many book calls we're making. Everyone wants to talk about the football, Pauly, although there isn't a great deal to talk about. I mean, since I spoke to you, I have to get used to this now because there used to be sometimes one game, sometimes no games because we used to do one every couple of days. But since the last time we spoke, there has been a couple of games, couple of lackluster games, to be fair. I mean, the game in the Europa League wasn't great last week, but let's talk about West Ham at the weekend because that's sort of the performance has got a lot of people talking, Pauly. But for me, as a Manchester United fan, I want to take all the talking points out of it and just say what a massive win that was for the team. And it didn't really matter how they got it, in my opinion.
Yeah, the most positive takeaway, I think, after the AC Milan draw was you could look and say, well, it can't get worse than that. And they damn near tried on Sunday. They damn near tried, but they ultimately prevailed. And I think it was expected to prevail. I know a lot of people were concerned going in. I read on Facebook someone Sunday morning gave this whole long diatribe into a supporters group that had me laughing because it laid out every possible scenario of, we're only 6 points ahead of David Moyes. If we lose this game, it's 3, and they have a game in hand. If we draw, they have a game in hand. This, that. It never laid out the possibility that, what if we win? What if we win and go 9 points clear of them?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
It's a weird situation, isn't it, Pauly? Because I felt before the game when I was listening to others like yourself, when I was reading things, listening to things, it was almost as if people were suggesting that a draw would be a very good result for Manchester United, which is really strange to think West Ham at home draw a very good result for United. I suppose it says a lot about, obviously, the season that West Ham's had. It says a lot about probably some of the state of how our team at the moment and our current form and the way that the squad is. I think there's a lot to be said about that. NZZ said here, great news, some players back from injury. And I think that is the key. I don't want to say we've been in an injury crisis, Pauly, but I think it'd be very naive to suggest that a lot of our struggles recently have you can't say that the injuries haven't played a part. We've talked about Paul Pogba, obviously our forward line in Martial and Cavani, and let's talk about Rashford, Paul, because Rashford on Sunday for me clearly wasn't fit. You could just see that in the way he was running from minute one. But he put the shirt on and he did a job and he filled a position, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. The injuries have been big and everybody's had them this season. And we took advantage when everybody had them. Remember December, everyone was hurt. Leicester had a bunch of injuries, Liverpool, the works. And we took advantage. And it would have been naive of you to say, oh, they're going to get their players back, but we're not going to run into injury problems. It was inevitable. And we've handled it very well. It's been bumpy. It's been frustrating. It's been disappointing, but we haven't lost the game. The last time we lost the game was against Sheffield United, where we had a full strength squad.
Yeah.
We've navigated this issue with we've gotten draws. We've had some bad draws where we dropped points, like against Everton. We struggled against West Brom. But ultimately, we've navigated this well to the point that, like you said, people were saying a draw against West Ham would be a good result. Get out of here. A home draw against West Ham would not have been a good result. That doesn't mean I didn't think it was a likely result. You go to this comment from Alan. I know they won on an own goal, but I was fine with the performance given the injuries and how they controlled the game. And this is really what it came down to, is that Facebook post that I just quoted before. It started out saying, we've got a lot of injuries. We don't really have any options available, but I hope we don't set up too defensively. And I'm like, well, what do you expect? Our 3 fit midfielders are Matic, McTominay, and Fred. That's defensive right there. There's no way around it. It's not even like Donny van de Beek is available and Solskjaer just doesn't trust him, so he's going to leave him on the bench, and we know that. He wasn't even available. No. So you knew it was going to be defensive. You knew it was going to be frustrating. But I look back at the FA Cup match 5 weeks ago, where we started with Matic and Fred and Van de Beek, and Greenwood played up top, and West Ham played a very strong side. I believe it was like 100, maybe 99% full strength. They didn't come near our goal. For 120 minutes, Dean Henderson had almost nothing to do. So you said, okay, we're going to bring Bruno Fernandes back in. We're going to bring an injured Marcus Rashford back in, but that's still an upgrade. So we should do enough to win. And they did. They did enough to win. Alan's right. We won on an own goal, but we deserved a goal. The rest were coming. Greenwood hit the post. I think he hit the post twice, maybe, or no, one was saved onto the post. Yeah, we did enough to win, and in the past we've had plenty of games like this where we've done enough to win, and we make a mistake, and it ends up being 1-1. So in this case, good job by us to see this out and get the 3 points, because it was that, and we didn't have people available. You kind of knew someone that Solskjaer said wasn't fit was going to play. It was probably going to be Marcus Rashford, because unless someone actually amputates his foot, he's gonna keep going out there. And the alternative was what? The alternative was probably Alex Telles at left wing. It wasn't going to be Amad Diallo. Solskjaer has made it pretty clear he doesn't think he's ready for first team football. Certainly not in the Premier League. He plays him in the Europa League, where he's played. That's a different level. It's more the continental game. It's not the English game. He played him for 45 minutes against Milan. Well, he's from Italy. He's used to the Italian game. Yeah. I don't know if he's ready to go from the jump against a West Ham. And that's not to say that maybe he is, but if he's only ready to play, if you think that Amad Diallo can only give you 60 minutes against West Ham and Marcus Rashford is hurt, you're better off playing Alex Telles from the jump and bringing on Amad at halftime or 60 minutes in to let him run at more tired legs.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great point you make, Pauly. And to be fair, I think selection's an interesting point on both sides of the coin, because we know, obviously, I'll be honest with you, I was worried about this game as well this weekend. The only time I started to get confident about this game was an hour before kickoff, when the teams were announced, and I saw the way that West Ham set up. Because if you watched a bit of West Ham and you know a little bit about their players, you could see just in their team selection what they were coming for at the weekend. And then I thought that takes the risk of maybe losing the game out the picture. They're always a threat from set pieces. I get that, and that's obviously what they were looking for. And then obviously you see Rashford come in, and you think to yourself, well, he must be fit enough to give us some kind of performance. And this is the thing, this is what I want to say to you, Paul, because I think a lot of fans got wound up by the fact that Rashford was playing on Sunday. They were wound up about the substitutions, which we'll talk about later in the show. We're going to go on to that, talk about lack of substitutions. But at the end of the day, Ollie knows more than us about the availability of his players. And we fast forward to today, Pauly, and the news regarding injuries is starting to look a lot more positive, obviously, as people have said their players are coming back now. So, Ollie probably knew come Thursday he would have a few more options available to him. And therefore, that's why he was probably more happy to risk Marcus on Sunday.
Yes. And let's call a spade here. It's not like Ollie went to Marcus and said, I need you to play on Sunday. And Marcus went, no, I'm hurt. And Ollie said, no, I need you to play. Marcus has been knocking on Ollie's. He does it every game. He knocks on Ollie's door and goes, I swear I'm good. I'm good. Put me in there. Put me in there, boss. And these players these days, now you could say Ollie looks at the doctors and the medical staff and he says, how bad's his injury? Can he play? And they say, oh, it's pretty bad. He could play. He's not going to be too effective. And then, will he get more hurt? There's a risk, but he should be okay. And then Ollie says, go, because all these players, they're building their brand. They're in charge of themselves. They worry about that. They all have their own personal doctors as well. So and that's where we see it at Chelsea, where Christian Pulisic is getting into trouble or has gotten in trouble because his doctors have said he's fine, he can play. And Chelsea's doctors have said, we're worried about those hamstrings. We should hold him back a bit. All these players have their own doctors who are looking out for their best interests just to make sure that if there is something where it's like you can play, but the risk of damaging that long-term and shortening your career by 3 or 4 years is high, the player knows this and can factor it in. So his doctors have signed off on this. The club doctors have signed off on this. He's knocking on Ollie's door saying, I can give you something. And sometimes just being out there is enough. Like we saw West Ham set out sorry, for lack of a better word, an agenda, as everybody does. Don't let Bruno Fernandes get the ball. Yeah. They also set out and said, don't let them come down that left-hand side. Luke Shaw, Marcus Rashford, those are their other two dangerous players. And they really focused on that, which is why Bruno was able to get on the ball and be more influential than normal, because they were are they doing that if it's Alex Tellez and Luke Shaw? Two left footers, their overlaps a little bit more awkward than, I don't know, maybe not. You did bring up, though, how David Moyes lined up for this game. And I thought what you said was the ultimate example of why he's a good West Ham, good Everton manager and can't do it at United. It's because he came into this so conservative. The way I was mad at Ollie for not attacking Liverpool at Anfield because it's not Anfield and it's different circumstances. David Moyes just came in and went, it's Manchester United, Old Trafford. Let's sit back, play for a draw. They don't have a lot of attackers. If we just sit back defensively, we can get a 0-0 here. And cool, that's what you do when you have some success with that, because if West Ham get a 0-0 at Old Trafford, that's a great result for them. Yeah. But then when you went to Old Trafford as United manager, you had the same mentality when you played Chelsea. And there was no disconnect. And that's why this is the level that he belongs at.
And this is why fans had a problem, Paul. This is why we got to the point where a plane was flying over Old Trafford, because for 7 months, United were playing in games where a point would have been acceptable for Everton. But when you're a Manchester United and you're a Manchester United manager, those games that are a point's acceptable for Everton isn't an acceptable point for Manchester
I remember thinking about this over maybe yesterday or the day before, and I was like, wasn't that like the last time we were united as a fan base, where everybody's like, we don't want to become a sacking club, but like within a month or so, like some people were saying it in November, December, and everybody's like, we can't become a sacking club. You got to give him time. And by February, every single person was like, we hired the wrong guy. This isn't it. And then with Van Gaal, everybody was on board with Van Gaal. And after he got us back into the Champions League, and it was great. And then we got those fresh new signings, Memphis Depay, Martial, Schweinsteiger, Schneiderlin. And by February, everybody was like, it's just too boring. It wasn't like anybody hated the man. Like, there were some people saying we needed to fire him. There were others. There were very quiet factions that were being like, he needs to go. And there were very quiet factions being like, he needs to stay, because at that point the writing was on the wall and Mourinho was coming. But everybody ultimately was just like, they backed him, but it was just, this is so boring. And then they hired Mourinho, and from day one, the fan base was divided, and it's never come back together since then.
No, it's weird. With David Moyes, I mean, I'll be honest with you, Paulie, I thought the writing was on the wall for David Moyes even before the season started. I thought the transfer market that season was a disaster. Now, I'm not just blaming David Moyes for that, because as we know, it was Ed Woodward's first proper transfer market as United CEO. But between them as a pair, it was poor. But I didn't like the players that David Moyes had sort of identified either, except he was going for a couple of his old boys at Everton.
Leighton Baines, Fellaini.
Yeah, we got Fellaini, Leighton Baines, and good players at the time, but I never really thought that that's where we should be looking. And then if you look at some of the other players they missed out on, Toni Kroos, Thiago, Cesc Fabregas, all those players they reportedly after in the summer, how do you go from that to Marouane Fellaini, Leighton Baines? But anyway, that's, we could talk about David Moyes. We could do that for a whole show, Pauly. I just want to say in the comments, we've had a few people talking about the international break. Obviously, that's coming up next week. People asking maybe about which players will be able to go, which players won't. In all honesty, guys, I don't know enough. I do know from an England point of view.
None of them should be able to go. None of them. We shouldn't be having international breaks. This is ridiculous. None of them should be able to go.
No, I do agree. I know Portugal, from an England point of view, Portugal's now been taken off the red list, so that probably does allow Bruno Fernandes to go away. What I will say on the international break is I think most teams have got 3 friendlies during this break.
Not England. Not England. They've got 3 qualifiers. They've got 3 qualifiers. Someone after the game against Leicester, go into the dressing room and just drop a chair on Bruno's foot, drop a chair on Rashford's foot, do something that they have to pull out. Like Marcus Rashford, the same way that he will not miss a United game, he's not missing an England game either. And there's 3 of them.
Yeah.
There's 3 of them.
But what I will say, Pauly, like, Bruno, realistically, does he play all 3 games for Portugal? This is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to balance it out by saying, even though if they go away, don't think that they will play 3 lots of 90 minutes. I don't know. I'm not sure. Paul Pogba's another one. I'm a bit concerned.
Paul Pogba was not called up.
Okay, that's cool.
So that's good.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. Excuse me. Are Portugal playing qualifiers or friendlies?
I don't know. They're
probably qualifiers. They're probably qualifiers, but there's probably a couple joke teams. So factor this in. Everybody knows the players are playing too much, and the managers know that they don't want to piss off the club, so they're going to rotate their team anyway. Thank you, Irwa, in the comments. The qualifiers. They're going to rotate their team anyway if they take a lead because they're playing minnows, probably like Liechtenstein or something. He'll come off the pitch. But think about it this way: you were going to do that regardless. If you go 5-0 up on Liechtenstein, you're going to pull Ronaldo and Bruno off the pitch. But now, instead of doing that once or twice, you're doing that 3 times. There's going to be an extra 60 minutes in there. That just, if he doesn't start one game, he probably wouldn't have started one game anyway. Like if they give somebody else a chance to play one of the games, they probably would have done that if there were only 2 games. So if he plays 60 minutes the first game and 30 minutes the second game, that would have been it in a normal situation. Now you're going to tack on another 60 to 70 minutes of a third game, all in the space of 2 weeks. And then you're coming back to your club for the run-in where, depending on what happens on Thursday, you're looking at another 2 games a week.
Well, the other interesting one as well is Luke Shaw, Pauly, because it's ironic, obviously. He's not been in the looking for England over the last couple of years, to be fair. Well, since the 2014,
2014 World Cup, 2014. World Cup. Before he came to us.
And the moment he comes into form, now you think to yourself, I mean, Luke of all players, given his injury record and his fitness issues in the past, this 2 weeks probably would have done him really good just to get these off sort of thing. But he looks like he'll be England's prime.
He was called up after the World Cup. Because remember, Mourinho put him back in the team instead of Young, and he got called up instead of Young. I don't know if he played. He might have gotten hurt, of course.
But I think of all players, Pauly, he is one player that would really benefit from a couple of weeks rest, but not even he's going to get it, is he? You know what I mean?
Drop a chair on his foot too, because he's hurt also.
Yeah.
He's hurt. I was a little bit surprised to see him start against West Ham, but that's when you knew that this game was important and this meant business, especially because he had to come on against Milan. Against City, he was a late, we talked about this last week. He was a late fitness doubt. And at the last minute, they said he's fit to play. 2 times during that game, in the first half and in the second half, the commentators were like, Alex Tellez on the touchline ready to come on because Shaw's hurt. And it was no surprise that he wasn't playing against Milan, but the fact that he came on for a half hour did surprise me. And then I figured we'll buy him 90 minutes unless Rashford can't play and Tellez needs to start. I figured we could buy him 90 minutes here because it would have looked not 90 minutes. He would have had to come on after 60 minutes because it would have been 0-0.
Yeah.
He needs a break too. They all need a break. And let's call a spade here. It's not just United players that need a break.
No.
Trent Alexander-Arnold needs a break, and
I think he'll get one. I don't think he gets in England's side as a right back at the moment. To be fair, he might get more break than he's actually expecting. I'd like to see Reece James there from an England point of view. To be honest,
Gareth Southgate could, in theory, just call up his B players or players that aren't starting week in, week out for their club team and go through these qualifiers, no problem.
Yeah, but there you are. Look, there they are. San Marino, Albania, Poland. You'd expect England to be able to get through at least two of those, like you say, with their second, even third string team, to be honest.
But you could play Reece James and you know who you could call up? Emil Smith-Rowe. Like, call him up.
Yeah.
And you can win with those things.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, there you have it from Pauly. If he's got anything to do with it, there'll be more chairs flying around the United.
One more day. So Lokish
then a no disqualification WWE matchup. There'll be more chairs flying around than one of those. But yeah,
just this point from Lokish, which don't think international duty is a big issue. I am of that belief year in, year out. When people complain about it, I say, shut up. That's what you want to support, a big club. That's what happens. And these players would die to put on their country's shirt. This year is different. Remember, every minute wears on you. Even the ones you played in September and October, they wear on you. And the fresher players rise up in the second half of the season. Divock Origi, when Liverpool won the Champions League, was immense in the second half of the season. He didn't play in the first half of the season. He was fresh. Mason Greenwood, remember how he tore up Cardiff in his debut? Because he was fresh. They were at the end of an exhausting season. Callum Hudson-Odoi came on at the end of that year and tore it up. Yeah. Every minute counts. 3 games is ridiculous. I'm not too worried about playing time. I'm not too worried. Look, England are going to go at 60% speed and beat San Marino 5-0. That's fine, but you want players to recover. Yeah. And that's, you also just don't want them traveling around Europe right now, because what happens if there is an outbreak in one of these? You are taking people who have been secluded in bubbles together for the last international break was in November. So it's been the better part of 4 months now. And now you're letting them intermingle again. And that's when we run into trouble. And suddenly it's not an issue that he played 2 games. It's an issue that he tested positive and he misses 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, I agree. But Pauly, also as well, you think the international managers, and I'm thinking Southgate here because I haven't got time off the top of my head to think about where everybody else is going and who they all play for. But Gareth Southgate, off the top of my head, you've got to be thinking, I know he's England manager, but he's got to be looking at the Premier League coming into the final 10 games of the season. And in fairness, he's got to make sure he's seen to be trying to be fair when he's playing these players and the way he rotates his squad now. You know, that's important as well, because if he starts giving more minutes to Manchester United players than he does Chelsea players, and, you know, he knows he's going to get a bit of stick for that, you know, things like that. He's got to think about, you know, if Shaw plays the game, Chilwell plays the game, something like that. You know, he's got to think about what he's doing here, because I know he's in a no-win situation, but I do think it's important in this season of all season for the international managers to try and help the clubs out a little bit.
Yeah, and he said he got into a little verbal tussle with Mourinho back in November, where Mourinho basically said he publicly said why you shouldn't be playing Kane all those minutes. You have 3 games and Kane shouldn't be playing all them. And Southgate kind of came back and said, look, my job is to qualify. My job is, if we're in the Nations League, my job is to win the Nations League. And you're out there running Harry Kane out there in the League Cup when you're up 3-0. Why? It goes both ways.
Yeah. The other thing as well is it's in no interest for Gareth Southgate to flog any of his players in this international break anyway, because let's be honest, he's got a major tournament coming up this summer. And as much as it's in the interest for these players to be right for their clubs, he's going to want them to be fresh come the summer as well, Pauly. So he's got to think about, he doesn't want anyone to get injured in this break that's going to roll them out the summer either, does he?
Yeah, injuries, but injuries you can only prevent. Someone, if you're going to get hurt, you're going to get hurt. Joe Gomez got hurt in training. They happen. The issue here, and this is why it's always tough, is because there is a tournament coming up. And what are your plans? When do you get to implement them? Yeah. Every year we see, qualifying mainly happens in September and October and November. You typically play 6 games there. If there's qualifying, World Cup qualifying is 10 games, 6 out of 10 take place there. When you get to the players, I always say this, the players that typically get you to a tournament aren't always the players that play in the tournament. Form changes. In November, it's still the beginning of the season. There could be an 18-year-old who's made 3 appearances, who bursts onto the scene later. Trent Alexander-Arnold had barely played. Marcus Rashford bursting onto the scene. Marcus Rashford didn't play until February and was in the picture for the Euros. So there's always something. So by March, you have a better look at whose form has just dropped off. And now's where, okay, these are going to be, I got 33 players on my radar here. What's the best way to play them? We played that back 3 at the World Cup. Is that the best way to go about things now? We played a 4-3-3 after the World Cup, but do we need to change that? How can I implement that? And I always say competitive games are much better to do that in than friendlies. Even a competitive game against Luxembourg is still probably better to implement a new system, or certainly Serbia or countries like that. Yeah. Or is a better time to implement stuff than in a friendly against Germany. Because what ends up happening in friendlies is, and this is what always drives me nuts, because as an American, I watch the US team play a million friendlies because we don't have Euros to qualify for and everything. What ends up happening is you make your 6 subs and you bring on that young kid, or you bring on that player that you want to get a look at. But what's the point in seeing how a midfielder plays if he's not playing next to Jordan Henderson? Jordan Henderson's going to start. What's the point in seeing how he partners up? What's the point in seeing how that third attacker plays if he's not linking up with Sterling and Kane? You want to see how those guys are going to play. So once you end up making 6 changes and it's just, 11 guys in England shirts, you're not learning much. So I always say the competitive matches are better because you get to pick your changes and everybody's got to take it seriously.
It's the same with the rules of a friendly though, Pauly. When you can make 8 substitutions, how much does the game always break up when you can make that many changes during the game? And even like you say, even if you make those changes at the start of the game's still going to be as bitty as if you make them in the game.
The game's still only played at 70% and everything. You need to have 2 teams going at it. Yeah. In order to really learn about players and how your team is going to perform. So from that perspective, when you say Gareth Southgate doesn't want to tire his players out or anything, or he could just slag this off, and when I say you could call up the likes of Reece James and Patrick Bamford and a bunch of players who and take care of business, Southgate, yes, but he's also like, but I want to implement my style. I need my guys on the training ground so we can be ready for the Euros.
Yeah, it's that constant tussle, Pauly, and there's never, I feel for international managers, I feel for clubs because, they're in a situation where, they're paying the players and that'll always be their argument. I do want to just say, though, for every, negative on international, we comments like this, Van der Beek needs it for Netherlands. It could also work in a favour for a club because if Donny can go and get a couple and lots of 90 minutes, Paul, he hasn't played a lot of games for United. He's obviously just had a injury. In a way, internationals sometimes can get some players back to match fitness, can't they? So it all
look at what Pogba did back in November, although he came back and missed 2 more games, but that was weird. But then he came back and was our best player for 6 weeks. Yeah. So yes, Donny does need it for the Netherlands, but come on, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, don't send these players out.
No. Well, it'll be interesting. Like I say, it will all unfold over the next week or 2. I'm sure we'll find out about who's going, who's not going. Pauly, before we move it back, onto what's on social media, I just want to move it back to United quickly because it is United happy hour. That's twice now in a couple of weeks we've got onto a tangent about international football. There's a comment that coming here from Alan.
Because talking about how stupid FIFA is really easy.
Yeah, well, yeah, there is that as well. Again, we could do a whole show on it, Pauly, but this comment that coming from Alan, Matic is a problem for me. I don't think he plays well with either McTominay, who's too slow, or Fred, both left-footed. So Pogba is the only midfield he seems to be able to play with. Now, what I'm saying to you is, Pauly, do you think Alan's got a point here? So basically, I've got this image in my head. If Paul Pogba's laid on the injury table, you might as well double it up and put Matic next to him and just let him rest for a couple of weeks. Because while ever Pogba's not playing, Matic doesn't play anymore. Is it as simple as that? Because I'll be honest with you, we know Matic's performances have been a problem for a while now, but it is getting to a point where it does seem, especially in that double pivot, the only player he can play with is Paul Pogba, really.
Yes and no. Well, look, Alan, you're not breaking any news here, which is why you expect the performances that we've been getting recently. This is why I don't understand when people watch a game like against AC Milan and they say, "Oh, we're not good enough," and it's like, well, we knew that. We knew McTominay, Fred as a pair are not good enough to be week in, week out. We know that Matic and Fred provide you nothing going forward in attack. So when it happens, why are we surprised by this? It's not going to change next week. We can't go out and sign anybody. Matic and McTominay cannot play together at all. Going into 2 weeks ago, I believe, they had played a total of 828 minutes together in midfield in their 4 years in the United first team. 828 minutes. That means both Jose Mourinho and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer avoided putting the two of them on the field at the same time. There's a reason for that. And he brought on what he did. He brought on McTominay against West Ham in the FA Cup because he needed some more form of offense, of attack. Matic is always going to protect you defensively, and he's going to make you more solid defensively. Yeah. So Matic and Fred as a pair is very solid defensively, but you then put a lot more attacking onus onto Fred. It's not that Fred's too left-footed. He's actually our most two-footed midfielder. He uses his weak foot more than any of our other midfielders. He's not a great passer with his right foot, but he's not a great passer with his left foot either. And that's where he gets... Carl Anker wrote this great article in The Athletic called What is Fred? And he focused on how so many times Fred looks up, spots the right pass, and just hits it 5 yards. And it's an open pass. It's not even a difficult one. And he just mishits it. That's Fred. So it is hard because you don't get any attacking impetus there. You don't really get it with McTominay and Fred either. It's not a Matic problem because Matic does provide you very stable defensively. It's just we lack that creator, which means someone else has to do it. And it means the center backs have to be better on the ball. And Eric Bailly doesn't do that. The fullbacks have to be better on the ball. And Wan-Bissaka doesn't do that. And Alex Telles doesn't do that either. So it's hard to... Alex Telles is great in the final third, but he doesn't help you get to the final third.
I see where you're coming from because with Fred, I see a player that's constantly battling with himself, Pauly, because I see that his eyes are seeing it, his brain wants to do it, but the execution's not there, and it's this constant tussle with himself. If the execution's not there, then I'm not going to do it, and I wish he would just keep.
But Fred does. All he does is always just apologizing.
Yeah, and it's like look at Bruno, Fred. Look at Bruno. I mean, Bruno messes up so many passes. But he keeps doing it and he keeps doing it and he gets one right eventually. Like we saw against Milan the other day, the Ahmad, the ball for Ahmad was beautiful. But we see him overhit so many of those. We see him under it so many. It's all about the state of mind, I think, of players. And that's the difference. Some players have got that, the last pass is the last pass. Forget it. It's gone. We go again. I think for some other players, and I think when you like Fred, who's not an established member he hasn't been an established member of the team. He doesn't want to make too many errors or to be seen.
Neither of them pass between the lines. They're just afraid to do it. And Matic does it very well. He's a really underrated passer, but Here's where it becomes complicated. When Pogba's next to Matic, there's someone marking Pogba. And that opens up the passing lanes to Bruno or to somebody else. Yep. When Matic is on the ball and Fred's next to him, they just back off and mark Fred. It's almost exactly like what United did to City last week. It's we don't care that you have the ball. We're just going to prevent you from passing the ball to where you want to pass it. And then he can't pass between the lines. When Pogba's on the pitch, they'll come and they'll pressure him. They'll try to cut off the angles to Pogba, and it creates angles for everybody else. And Matic is really good at putting them through those angles. Yeah. But again, he can't do that with McTominay. He can't do that with Fred. So I don't think it's a Matic problem. It's just a lack of creative player problem.
Yeah, no, I agree. But like we said, there's been a lot of talk, as always, on social media, Pauly, about the weekend's game. So let's just go and take a look at what has been going on. See, nothing lackluster about that. Nailed it third time. Told you we were, it was good fun. Pauly, the first thing I want to pick up on social media, and I sort of touched on it at the top, but very, very briefly, in fact, people probably didn't even hear about it, was this idea that fans were still disgruntled, obviously, about the way we played against West Ham. And, thinking about where we are in the stage of the season now, Pauly, where do you sit on this idea of style versus substance? And, are the fans right to, well, I'm not going to say are they right to have it, because they're right to have their opinion they want to have. Of course, every fan can have their own opinion, but, should we be getting upset about that win on Sunday?
No, 3 points are 3 points. We're in the stage of it. We're battling injuries. We're in a stage of the season where it's just about results.
Yeah.
And if you go back and look, I always point at this particular team, the 2008 team that won the Champions League.
Yeah.
When it got to this point of the season, they stopped winning pretty. They stopped winning as consistently too. I think they only won 3 of their last 6 games. But they stopped winning pretty. They stopped running teams off the pitch. And you could tell that Fergie was pulling the reins on them and said, all right, now we have to 1-0, 2-0. Let's be smart about this. Let's see it out, because we got to save our energy. And look, if we had a full strength squad and we were struggling, it'd be a concern. But again, you look at all the injuries we have. We know McTominay, Fred against the deep block, not really that effective. We know Daniel James. What's he good at? He's a very good defensive winger. He's very good on the counterattack. Those 2 traits are not exactly going to be the defensive aspect he was immense in, but we're not going to have space to counter West Ham, and he's not good against deep blocks. So,
and a couple of times he did have space to counter, Pauly. There were some situations, one especially I remember in the second half, where
he had the ball behind Bruno,
and he just had a pass to Bruno that he just had to play in front. Then I know Bruno would have picked the right pass in that situation, because he always does. And I think that would have certainly led to an expected goal chance of quite high.
Because that was one where it was like so many things have to go right in every situation. You have to pick out the right pass. You have to, and then sometimes you just mishit it, which happens to everybody. Now the better players, it happens to them less. Yeah. That's kind of what makes you better, is how often you mishit the ball. If it's once every 1,000 touches, that's better than once every 100. And he just mishit it. He picked out the right pass. He just mishit it. Like it wasn't a situation where it was like, why'd you shoot when you had a man wide open? Why'd you pass when you should have shot? It was, you did the right thing. You just mishit it.
My 2 cents worth on this for what it is worth, Pauly. I just want to say that, I'm not going to sit here and say that I was happy with what I was watching on Sunday, because that's not the football that I want to watch from a football team. Don't get me wrong. But and I think everyone should be now, is wise enough to know this squad now and its capabilities. And when you put out a team that we had to put out at the weekend and playing against the team that we were going to put out, there's enough evidence out there now. There's a big enough sample size that's going to tell you that games like that are always going to be a struggle for this current crop of Manchester United players. It's just the way it is. It's unfortunate. And you've already talked about that, Pauly.
If the players weren't good enough 3 weeks ago, they're not good enough now. We can't sign a new player. That's just not how it works. And
even take that back to the summer as well, Paulie. You know, you look at, obviously we talked about this, you didn't get what you wanted in the summer. We would have liked to see more. You think about some of the players we were linked with in the summer, you'd like to think if those players were at the club, hypothetically, they would be better players in those sort of games, wouldn't they? For example, Jadon Sancho instead of Dan James, just much better at playing against a low block. That's just one example. But anyway, let's not harp on about that. But that's sort of something that leads us in from style to the next thing that's dominating what's on social media, Paul. It's all the furore around Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's new contract, and reported that he has agreed an extension, I think around about 9 million. I'm not sure of the length yet. Nothing's actually been confirmed by club or by manager. And the reason I say that this links to style is because I think a lot of fans are looking at the way that we're playing at the moment and saying, how the hell, why is the manager getting a new contract while we are playing like this? And I just want to say quickly, Paul, before I put it to you, if you look at every manager that has left Manchester United or been sacked by Manchester United since Alex Ferguson, none of them have been sacked because of their style of football. I would argue that all of them have been sacked.
One of them.
All of them.
One of them.
Well, maybe
one out of three was.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is, if you look at the common denominator about when United sack their managers, and it's all to do with Champions League qualification for Europe. So I think it's a bit naive of fans to think that Ollie in second place, regardless of the football that he's playing, under the way they are operating as a business and as a football club, they are always going to be offering him a new contract, aren't they, Paulie?
Oh, 100%. First of all, he's going into the final year of his contract, which means you have to extend him. You can't have a coach on the final year of his deal. It's just not going to work. If he calls up a new player next week, now I understand that other teams change managers all the time, but it's mostly they've got sporting directors and everything. You're buying into the club because one manager isn't going to change too much from the other one. The club knows what they're doing. Well, here the club is built around the manager. That's whether that's how it should be is a different question. This is how it is. So if you call up and if Ollie calls up a player and says, well, I've got 1 year on my contract left, and then who knows, and Max Allegri's available, and you're like, well, I'm not going to fit Max Allegri's spot, you might be a bit more hesitant to come. What you could see this now is Christian Pulisic at Chelsea he can't get a game. And he's also the one who went on record when he signed with Chelsea and said, I signed with them because I liked Mauricio Sarri. Well, you should have done your homework. You should have known he wouldn't have been there by the time you got there. You're getting what you deserve. So you need to give him a new contract. He has also earned a new contract. You're second in the league. You're still in two cup competitions. I think people were mad because they're like, why are we doing this before the summer? Why didn't you learn your lesson? Well, unless he plummets them down to 5th or 6th, which is unlikely. The stats website 538 has us as a 95% chance of making the top 4. So he'd have to really collapse to finish outside the Champions League. Unless you do that, he's going to be here next year. Not to mention that they've always that you might say that the board might have looked at him and said, remember, we always talk about this. He went to them and said, this is my plan. 3-5-year plan. Here's what we're going to do in year 1. Here's what we're going to do in year 2. Here's what I need to get that done. And they didn't deliver on that. And there's a chance that the board might have acknowledged that and told him, or at least that's what they're discussing. They're saying, well, we didn't, we're kind of pausing. This is more year 1.5. Maybe in their eyes it is. Maybe I'm making that up. I don't know. It's entirely speculation on my point, but that could factor into their decision. Anyway, all that was announced was he's agreed to a thing. And then in The Athletic, they said, I think the first thing I read was that they will begin negotiations in the coming months or in a month or two. The Athletic said negotiations will begin over the summer. People are mad because they're doing it now and not waiting till the summer. And it's like a month or two is the end of the season. And that's the summer. All of a sudden, I woke up, I saw this happen Saturday evening, and I just threw my phone to the other side of the room and I said, I'm not dealing with this. get out. I don't want to be anywhere near my phone because if I look at Twitter, I'm just going to, even if I look at Twitter for other things, I'm going to see this. And I don't know what I did. I probably got really drunk, which is probably why I don't know what I did.
It's almost like United are dipping their toe in the water, aren't they? Just let's put it out to the media and just see what the reaction's like before we actually commit to anything here. And I hope they're not doing that because obviously you don't want to judge anything off our fan base. And we're the most unpredictable fan base there is.
And Sunday, I woke up and I read this and I was like, why are people freaking out? Like, you're freaking out that they're doing this now and not in the summer. Like, they haven't signed anything yet. And this con from Hella is the perfect one. The contract doesn't really mean that much. There's going to be conditions in that contract whereby certain criteria need to be fulfilled or he's out. It doesn't mean that much to begin with because we extended Mourinho and sacked him a year later.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a lot of complications in getting a player out of their contract. A manager's easy. You just sack them. And then there's a payout and whatever. But let's be honest, Hella's right. There's definitely going to be a clause in there that says if you don't qualify for the Champions League, the payout is lower. If Ali all of a sudden starts doing a bad job, they'll sack him. It's really not that difficult. I'm pretty sure Chris Wilder got an extension last year. Where's he now?
Yeah, and the other thing as well, guys, is it's not going to be a super long contract. He's not going to be handed another 4 years on this, I wouldn't imagine. I think it'll be 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, depending on how it works in with the calendar and their numbers and everything like that. You know, and as much as we talk about United putting clauses in there, you know, Ollie needs to learn from the mistakes of other managers and what's gone before as well. And if he finishes second this season, Pauly, and maybe wins a trophy, he's in a real position of strength. So he needs to sit down at the negotiating table and say, look, I need you to be telling me that you're going to help me get at least some of my targets. I know we're not going to be able to get all of them, but if you want me to do a job properly, you got to back me, because that was the problem with Mourinho. One day he had that season where he finished second. Whether you want to view that as an achievement or not, the fact of the matter was that summer then, whether you feel he was backed or you don't, he didn't get the players he wanted, and therefore
because he already spent all the money.
And he spent.
Read the articles. Read the articles, Joe.
Yeah, but he spent 6 months moaning about it, didn't he? And nobody wants to do that. And Ollie doesn't want to obviously be in that position. He doesn't want to become at war with his own club. He loves this club. We know that. We know he's hesitant to sort of take on the owners. And
my favorite thing in the world. My favorite thing in the world is scrolling through social media when people say, well, what do you want in a manager? And they're like, I hope we hire someone who won't be a yes man and who will challenge the owners. Right. Because you're going to walk into a new job and the first thing you're going to do is say, well, I want to call my bosses idiots and say my bosses aren't, excuse me? Yeah. Are you out of your mind? Like you cannot find someone who is going to accept a job and say, look, if they don't believe in the owners, they're not going to accept the job. They're not going to take a job where they say, oh, on day one, I'm going to have to call my bosses out. Please get out of here.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Paul. But you know, like I say, he's a bit further down the line with this job now. He's done a good job, and you do want him to learn, and you want him to be savvy more than anything. We know if things go wrong, Paul, it's always the manager's head who's on the block, and that's fair enough. That's universally accepted football, but at least he's got something to work with here. Alice says here that. Oh, sorry, did you mean to put that comment up, Paul?
I did. It was.
That's someone who's
responded. Yeah, if you've never worked for anyone, if you think you're going to walk into a job and just immediately call out your bosses, what?
And this is interesting as well. Obviously, Mourinho's extension was based on a short-term vision, and you have to say, Paulie, every indication over the last few months with the appointment of the technical director, the director of football, the move toward analytics, does seem to be suggesting that the club's trying to go in a different direction now. So you do.
I think that factors into it, though. You just hired. Yeah. You just announced the restructuring that you now have. What's it called? What's the name of the job? Football director or something?
Football director. It's not a director of football. They've sort of coined it football director.
Something like that. But so now these people are in place, and it's like then the next thing you're doing is extending the manager. That's a token of them saying, like, this is our guy.
Yeah, and this is the system that we want to work with.
Exactly.
Especially for the next 2 years. And like I say, we'll see how that goes. But we talked a little bit about the new roles. Did we talk about it last week? I can't remember whether it was announced or not by then, but it was too long ago. it's not current enough for this anyway, but I'm sure we'll get around to that another time. Paulie, before we finish up, the third thing that I want to talk about has been going on social media. We did touch on this again earlier. I know a couple of people who late joined us today. Go back and watch the start of the show. We talked about the West Ham game. We even had a good discussion about internationals and what that means for United. But let's talk about this thing that's gone viral about Ollie and his use of substitutions. But it's not a new thing. Not a new thing at all. In fact, I think it's been one of the drums that the Ollie outs have liked to bang the loudest. And it's one thing that they really think they can hold on to, the fact that Solskjaer is hesitant to use his subvention. That is to his detriment. There was no substitutes used until, I think, was it 85 minutes on Sunday, Paulie, was it?
No, he didn't sub anybody.
Oh, no, sorry. Nobody got substituted. I thought there was going to be a substitute. Nobody was substituted on Sunday, with obviously a game coming up on Thursday against Milan, with the current sort of injury crisis, that, quote unquote, that we have in the squad. First of all, Paulie, where do you stand on this? Were you shocked that there was no substitutions, or do you think it was the right thing? Where are you on this?
I wasn't surprised at all. I don't know if I want to say if it was right, because I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but I don't think it was wrong. I wasn't shocked. If anything, I would have thought Matic would have came in. You're trying to see out a 1-0 win. I understand Rashford is hurt. Bruno's exhausted. I get that. You want to take him off. Yeah. But you can't, because you're trying to see out a 1-0 win. Here's the thing. You did this against an AC Milan team on Thursday, and you ended up with Fred playing as the number 10. You ended up with Alex.
Five, didn't they? He went to a back five for 20 minutes.
You ended up with Alex Telles as your left winger. And
left centre back, which I thought was interesting. The fact that you've got Alex Telles with the reputation that he's got for delivery, yet he played Luke Shaw as the wing back because he was the one he wanted further forward, Paulie. It says it all, really, and he made Alex Telles play left centre back.
And but you're essentially ending. So it was Luke Shaw as the left winger, essentially. When United play with a back five, it's really just a back four with a full back as the winger.
Yeah.
And they couldn't see it out because, of course, they couldn't. Did you see who was on the pitch? And what were you going to do here? They can't take. You're going to bring on Telles again, and you're going to bring on Fred or Matic and play with Fred instead of Bruno, and try to see out a 1-0 win against a much more physical West Ham side. And I realize look, Enzi's right. His fingers got burnt with the subs versus Milan. That's not the first time it's happened to him this season. No. He has tried to see out other games, and he has not gotten it.
The Tuanzebe sub against Everton obviously was another one. Tuanzebe against Leicester, where that was injury related. It was his own goal, obviously.
That was an injury related sub, so I don't blame. But here's and I don't. I mean, I didn't agree with the Tuanzebe sub against Everton, but that one was more just to waste time, and then the rest of the team handled it terribly. But last year against Sheffield United, this is what I really blame him for, is when we went 3-2 up, we were pounding on them, knocking on the door to get a fourth. And then he brought on Tuanzebe with 5 minutes to go to play and we switched to a 4-3-3, which I get it. We didn't really have a second midfielder. It was Fred and Lingard. But as soon as that happened like that, the game switched and Sheffield United started attacking us again. And we ended up dropping points. He has tried this before. What were you going to do? I think the main thing that people are mad about isn't that we didn't make subs. It's that Ahmad didn't play and Shola Shortiri didn't play. That's who they wanted to see. And they're like, well, we had the lead and he could have ran in behind. But he also needs to track back defensively. And no manager with a 1-0 lead against the team pushing the top four, no manager is bringing on two debutante teenagers to help see that out. That's just not going to happen. You want to put those kids in a situation where they can be good, that plays to their strengths, which is going out there and attack. You don't want to put them in and say, oh, we need you to defend the entire time. This is why I always say, we're more likely to see them play if we're down 1-0 than if it's 1-1 or 0-0 or we're up 1-0. Because if we're down 1-0 and we're chasing a goal, it's very easy to send them on and be like, go, let's see what you got. Go out there and just attack. And if we go down 2-0, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
we're up 1-0. We've got to see this out. And Dan James is your best defensive winger, so he's got to stay on the pitch. Marcus Rashford is, unfortunately, your second best defense. What are you going to do? Bring on Ahmad and try to hide him as a false 9 striker and put Mason Greenwood out there? No. So Bruno, we just discussed this. You can't go to Fred. So that there really wasn't much he could do, save for take off McTominay or Fred and bring on Matic.
Yeah,
so
Pauly,
you've got to see the game out.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you, Pauly. And actually, United looked at the best once they had gone 1-0 up. They looked like they were going to catch West Ham on the counter a couple of times. And as though you say that they had the best players on there defensively, Pauly, i.e. Dan James, they're also the best players to be on the pitch if you're trying to score a goal on the counter attack as well, aren't they? So, but, I said sort of early on when we touched on it as well, Pauly, the other thing that we are, fans can get as annoyed as they want, but the information, and I've said it before, we're not privy to, is the fitness of players moving forward. And like I said to you early on, Pauly, Ollie will have had an idea that certain players will be available for Thursday, and therefore he was able to sort of get more minutes into some of these players because he knew he'd have more available for Thursday. At that time, I think fans were just saying, well, why is he making subs? We got this game Thursday, but nobody at that point knows who's available on Thursday from a fan's point of view. The only person knows that is Ollie and his medical staff.
And someone tweeted this at me last week or something. And when I mentioned something about substitutions and Ahmad and everything and how we didn't have any other midfielders. And he was like, surely this is the boss's fault too, isn't it? Like he would know, I guess he would know if these kids were ready, but something along those lines, and I was like, no, that's the whole point is you've only seen Ahmad for a few minutes here and there. You've seen him at the U23 level for 90 minutes, but that's the U23s. Yeah. Ollie knows if he's ready or not. Ollie's the one he's the manager. He sees him every day. We're putting Nathan Bishop on the bench right now simply because we don't have 8 outfield players to sit on the bench. So we're just like, hey, Nathan, you want to put your kid on and sit on the bench? Like, we'll let you do that because there's a spot there. And so James Garner sat on the bench a lot of games last year, and Ollie had no intention of ever using him because he wasn't ready. So he knows. He sees him in training every day. We don't. And he's giving it to him slowly but surely. He scored a sensational goal against Milan and then was pretty much invisible the rest of the game. Like, at that age, you need 2 things to really get your chance. You need an injury and the manager having no other choice, and then you need to make yourself undroppable. Marcus Rashford, Louis van Gaal did not say, Marcus, show me what you can do. There were 3 strikers ahead of him that got hurt, and Louis said, I got no choice here. I'm going with you. He scored 2 goals, so that made it easier for him to be like, all right, we're going to go with you again on Sunday instead of trying to get creative here. It's one thing when somebody drops out of the game, out of the lineup 45 minutes before kick, you throw somebody on. Now you got 3 days to prepare and say, we can avoid having to play an academy kid at striker, but he scored 2 goals. So you said, okay, let's see and he scored 2 goals again. And then it was like, I got to keep playing you. And 2 games later, you scored against City. He made himself undroppable. That's what you have to do. And these guys, obviously they haven't had a lot of chances to do that because they haven't had enough of the injuries, but Ollie knows. Like, Ollie's the one that sees them in training every day. He speaks with their other coaches. He knows that it's a long, slow process, and you don't want to put them into a situation that's not the best because that's not going to be good for their long-term development.
No, exactly. And Lockish, I mean, this is all to do, Lockish, with United recruitment, and that is a show for another day. Whether you think that the squad should be strong enough is not an Ollie. It's about buying more players.
But where are you going to have a second starting 11 when they're all hurt? Donny van de Beek and Edinson Cavani got hurt without playing.
Yeah, and before we wrap up, Pauly, I'll just say, Marcus Rashford, if Ollie doesn't think that Martial or Cavani or even one of them would be available for Thursday against AC Milan, Marcus Rashford doesn't even start the game against West Ham, let alone play 90 minutes. So, look, guys, you just have to put faith in the manager on this one and selection. But unfortunately, that is all we've got time for today. Thanks for joining me, Pauly. Thank you to everybody who's been watching, who's commented. You've some fantastic comments. There's some great questions. Thanks for all your interaction. Do smash a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. We won't be with you on Thursday because, you know, United have a pretty big Europa League game that they need to take care of. And hopefully when we come back to you on Tuesday, we'll have plenty to talk about from that game. And also the FA Cup game at the weekend. This is we haven't even talked about the games that United have got coming up. But this is a massive week for United now, isn't it, Paulie, in terms of where they're going in the future and how this season could end.
Yeah, huge week. Let's get 6 points.
Exactly. All right, guys. Until then, though, take care, guys. Have a great week, a great weekend in particular, and we'll see you next Tuesday for the next United Happy Hour.